The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the big finish 9th Doctor story, the final part of a 3-part story called Food Fight. Cue Bluto Blutowski yelling food fight in Animal House. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going, Dom?
Very good, thanks. Thank you for filling in for me last week. I had my jury duty. Thankfully, it was only just one day, and I was able to return to the chair in order to come back to podcasting. Folks, I want to tell you about something very special. You can now get your very own Secrets of Doctor Who t-shirt, telephone case, coffee mug, and more by visiting sqpn.com/merch. It's a fun design that features me and Father Cory and Jimmy as some of the doctors with the TARDIS. And you can check it all out over there at sqpn.com/merch. I want to tell you about another show on the network you will definitely enjoy called Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, where Jimmy and I explore mysteries, both natural and supernatural, from the faith and reason perspectives. You can find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/mysterious.
And I tell you what's coming up this week on Mysterious World, except I don't know because I don't know when this will air in relation to it. So it's a mystery.
Things are a bit up in the air as we're trying to figure out what the BBC is when it's going to release the 13th Doctor special. You've probably already seen it and heard our discussion of it by the time you hear this episode.
Our planning sometimes can be a little wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. So
exactly. All right, but we are finishing up this fun story, the Ravagers story. It's a 3-part story featuring the 9th Doctor, Christopher Eccleston. Jimmy, can you give us a recap of this part of the story?
The TARDIS is taking the Doctor and new companion Nova on a hopscotch journey through time, letting them pick up their recent allies, Lieutenant Faraday and his commander Halloran from 1959 England, and also Marcus Aurelius Gallius from ancient Rome. Meanwhile, the Doctor is reprogramming the Prime drone from the agricultural planet, and when they arrive there, they use it to reprogram the other drones so they can take them to the Sphere of Freedom and use the drones to eat the time particles which the Doctor believes are causing all the problems. But when they get to the Sphere of Freedom and trigger their plan, it goes wrong. It turns out that the whole scheme of using time eddies to snatch people from history and feed their experiences into an elite virtual reality game has been Audrey's attempt to save the universe. Early on, she learned that the Ravagers would stop eating physical things if they were exposed to a fear pheromone from sentient life forms, and she designed the elite game to create enough of these pheromones to keep the Ravagers in check and stop them from devouring the universe. Now that the Doctor has removed the time particles linking people displaced in time from the game, the Ravagers break free and the time eddies start going out of control, meaning the coming destruction of the universe really was the Doctor's fault. A time eddy engulfs the Doctor, and he begins psychically appearing to Audrey at different points in her life, letting him learn about what's really been going on. Eventually, the time eddy deposits the Doctor in the realm of the Ravagers, but he uses the sonic screwdriver, the TARDIS key, the Gallifreyan control node, and the TARDIS itself to pull himself to safety in the TARDIS. Realizing he's arrived at a point before he first went to 1959 London, he begins making different choices to rewrite history. He goes to the Sphere of Freedom, where he meets Nova, but she doesn't remember him from the original now-aborted timeline. The Doctor also meets Audrey, who trusts him now that he fully understands what's been going on. He reveals that the Ravagers are addicted to fear pheromones, but it isn't those of the game players or the time-displaced people. Instead, they're addicted to their own fear pheromones as they vicariously experience the thrill of danger in the game. So, all they need to do is create an endless loop of randomly changing gameplay, and it will give the Ravagers all the pheromones they need, allowing all the displaced people to return to their own times. Audrey agrees to do this, and at the Doctor's behest, She agrees to pay the Sphere of Freedom employees enough money that they can go elsewhere if they wish. After a victory celebration of fireworks, the Doctor meets Nova in a cafe. She still doesn't remember him, but he insists on fulfilling his promise to take her somewhere nice. The end.
Excellent.
No, you need to do it more Mr. Burnsy. Excellent.
Yeah.
Yes, like Audrey. Excellent.
Yeah.
So my first question is, where did the node come from? This Gallifreyan control node. It's never really said, right?
It's not explicit, but they say that it is that Audrey found it in some kind of debris field in space from a massive explosion. And the Doctor is now referring to the Time Lords as a long dead race. And so I've assumed, even though there's not proof, that it's something from the Time War. And that's why the Doctor has been particularly evasive about describing its functions and doesn't want, and why it's so easily turned into a weapon and things like that.
Right.
And that's kind of the same assumption I've been going off as well.
Okay. And that, to recall that the Doctor at this point thinks that his people are all dead, and he's
Right.
the last survivor of his race. Okay. So, they have this like reverse navigating the TARDIS by homing in on Nova's DNA. They're trying to get back to the drone planet in a time eddy, and all of his equipment still has all these other DNA bits in it, and that's why they end up in the arena with the robot warrior with Lieutenant Faraday, and they bring him on board, and they keep bringing people on board, which is fun. But Faraday, he tells Faraday, we're trying to home in on DNA, and Faraday doesn't recognize the word DNA when the Doctor says he's locked onto it, which is funny because, as the Doctor points out, Faraday kind of predates DNA in a sense, or the knowledge of DNA.
It wasn't popularly known at this point in 1959, yeah.
Right. Watson and Crick were still
They're still basically working
on
on it. Yeah, they're still figuring it out at this point.
Yeah. So I thought that was a nice detail to include that so that we don't have that anachronism.
Oh, even better. I like when the Doctor is explaining to Nova where Faraday is from, and she says he's from 1959 London and blah, 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 blah on Earth. And Nova says, I recognize the word Earth.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that was good. Yeah, where people just don't have, extensive knowledge of everything.
Right.
That's good. That's good.
Well, and they had another great time reference there with where he comes from a point where it's an orbital dog and no aliens.
Right.
And of course, orbital dog is the Russian experiments in orbit.
Like
and aliens hadn't landed yet.
Yeah, like the dog.
Yep.
And then we keep having these flashbacks to Audrey throughout her timeline every 5 or 10 years, encountering the Doctor, showing up, as you mentioned, like psychically, or sometimes talking, sometimes not. And we don't get an explanation for that until the end, as you said. And so he shows up, and now, following on from last episode, her attempt to save the planet has failed. Save the planet from the Ravagers. The president is dead. And she gets mad because he doesn't help her. Like, he obviously knows something, but he's not helping. And I found that interesting. And my note at the time is, why is the Doctor watching her and not doing? So,
yeah, overall I like the story, but one thing I didn't like about it is the way the Doctor and Audrey are not talking to each other and just being straight out about things. They keep being cagey with each other in order to keep the plot going. Neither one of them can know too soon everything that's really going on. And so I'm I find myself a little frustrated as a writer with the dialogue. It's like these characters are being too cagey with each other. Just that you haven't justified sufficiently. If you want them to withhold information, you haven't sufficiently justified why they're doing that. And it comes off as a little artificial to me.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I did like the fact that the Doctor throughout this he's not omnipotent. Sometimes the Doctor can feel a little bit like he's a step ahead of everybody, including the audience, and is always, doing the right thing. Even if he has setbacks, it's not because he's necessarily made a mistake. It's just because it's hard. In this one, he makes mistakes. He's got limited information. He does the wrong thing, and he has to recover from it. So I like that dramatic aspect of it, that the doctor.
I do very much like that the doctor is making mistakes, and he has to conclude, yes, this really was all my fault. It's not like David Tennant's preening and Matt Smith's uber preening over how cool he is.
Right. Yeah. Yes. He's a limited doctor.
The only problem I have with it is kind of how they close this out, and you basically turn time travel into a deus ex machina. Well, all I got to do is go back before the problem started, and we can just fix everything. I made the mistake, but I can go back and stop myself from doing it in the first place, type of deal.
Right.
I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that. I mean, it's a time travel show, and that issue comes up, and you either set the rules of your universe so that you can't change time, or so that you can change time, or mix it up so like there are fixed points in time. And this just wasn't a fixed point, so the doctor can rewrite everything that happened.
You just got to be careful to avoid the Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure bit where it's like, let's remember later on, we're going to come back and leave a gun right here. Oh, here's a gun.
Yeah, exactly.
That is awesome, though, in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. I mean, that's exactly what you should do if you're a time traveler in a universe susceptible to change.
Just make notes. Make notes. Okay, later on, we're going to be very busy traveling to reset things up.
And actually, River Song does that kind of thing. I mean, she sends the doctor messages and then jumps out of an airlock knowing he'll be there to catch her.
That's true.
Well, we just talked about Curse of Fatal Death. Then that's what they did. I went back and talked and gave the architect dinner, and so now I can do this.
That's true. That is true. So then we have the other thing I want to mention is that the stakes. This is universe is at risk stakes. So this is the usual thing.
And that's because it's the reintroduction of Christopher Eccleston to the Doctor Who franchise.
Yeah.
They wanted to give him a big 3-part universe-threatening return story.
Yeah.
After this, in the range that Big Finish is now calling the 9th Doctor Adventures that feature Christopher Eccleston, they go back to what you would expect. It's more like what you'd see on TV, where you have individual hour-long or a little bit less than an hour standalone episodes. Okay. So like in the next 3 audio play set, which is called Responds to All Calls, which is a line taken from the exterior of the TARDIS.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's 3 standalone stories.
Okay. That's good. Yeah, I don't mind, occasionally having universe-threatening stories. It's when it's, one after the other.
Every week. Every week is another. The universe is under threat every week.
And even though they resolve it for now, I'm still a little nervous. I mean, for this scheme, because you've got the Ravagers getting their fear hits in this automated gameplay that's randomly changing to keep it interesting. And how long till dust gets into the game console and
when does the server crash?
Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking, is there a point where the Ravagers could get acclimated to the amount of fear response they get from the game, and they need more?
Right. Well, that could be an interesting return to the story.
That's the way addiction is said to work.
Yep. So we end up back again in 1959 in London. Again, not the correct time, Eddie, this time. I
like how they notice immediately, hey, the Romans are speaking English again.
Yeah, right, because the TARDIS is there to translate for them. He picks up Halloran and Marcus Aurelius Gallius. He has the Doctor has Nova disarm or hold Marcus's sword because he keeps wanting to whack people with it. And Nova accuses the Doctor of constantly giving explanations that no one, except us, the audience, understands, which is kind of fun. So, the Doctor's explaining things for our sake, of course.
I also like, despite how reflexively violent Gallius is, he actually gets some good lines and plays a useful role, because the way they get the plan implemented when they get to the Sphere of Freedom, because initially Audrey is still not trusting the Doctor and tries to arrest him and the rest of the gang, and she gets the Doctor, but the gang escapes, and using Nova's local knowledge of the Sphere of Freedom, they're like hiding out in the sewers. And then Gallius is the one who comes up with the plan to get Nova back into the TARDIS. And they use kind of a modified, at least based on what the Doctor says, it sounds like Gallius is using one of Hannibal's tactics from one of the Carthaginian wars, where you use the elephants as a big distraction to sneak in what you really want to happen. Right. And so the gentlemen, the military gentlemen, the three of them, create a big distraction in order to allow Nova to sneak back into the TARDIS and activate the drones.
Right.
Also, I love how, Faraday has had a little bit more off-world experience than his commander, Halloran. I mean, he's been fighting in this robot arena, which we don't see hardly any of, it turns out, in the story. Just he's dumped off there for a while, and then they collect him. Yep. But he's more on top of this time and space travel thing than Halloran is, who has, for the first time, just been whisked out of 1959. And Faraday is trying to explain that he thinks we're no longer on Earth, and Halloran is not buying it. And Gallius says any fool can see that the spirits have taken us away from the Earth. And it's like, yep, he's right.
Well, it's interesting that the Roman has the mental agility to conceive of a world outside of our world, whereas this 1950s British officer is very rigid in his thinking. So
well, I get a kick out of Dan Starkey in this because, of course, he played Strax, and he's really playing Gallius as a sane Strax. I mean, it's very much a similar character, similar type of language. Always wanting to attack, but actually in a sane way. Unlike Strax is like, let's just annihilate them all.
Yeah, I did notice that. It sounded at times, some of his very Suntaran in his language. Yeah, that was good. So the Doctor again shows up to Audrey, this time as she's just about to activate the Sphere of Freedom. Now 10 years after the destruction of Tarlicia.
Yeah, but by the way, speaking of Gallius, at one point he's like, they describe him as having muscles like Hercules, and so the Nova and Halloran and Faraday are having trouble keeping him down on the floor of the TARDIS when he's first resisting them. And the Doctor says to Nova, "How do you know about Hercules?" Because there's so much she doesn't know about ancient Earth history. And she says 2D vids, and then Gallius is like bursting free of them holding him down, saying he really wants to get out. And the Doctor says, well, then we better let him out. And he opens the door and lets him jump out into the vortex.
Right.
But he says, don't worry, I've extended the force field, so he's going to be okay. And he's like hanging in the vortex. He's hanging onto the with his fingers onto the bottom of the TARDIS door, so he doesn't fall completely. And the Doctor's like, you can let go if you want, but you're just going to, fall a ways and hit the force field. We'll let you back in when you agree to be nice. Meanwhile, Faraday is like, I think I'm going to be sick after looking at the vortex. And the Doctor says, if you are, I'm going to push you right out.
You're getting sick in the TARDIS control room. Yeah. They also apparently don't know anything about tea in the far future. That's one of the drinks that they mentioned.
They drink something called Charganzi.
And the Doctor, when he drinks it, makes the worst noises. If you have misophonia, you get those lip smacking noises. It was driving me a little crazy.
In the TARDIS Wikia summary, I didn't pick this up from Christopher Eccleston's performance, but I could see how they got it. They suggest at TARDIS Wikia that the Doctor is tipsy at this point. Okay, and so apparently Charganzi may have an alcoholic component.
Yeah, okay. I got a little bit of that. He kind of played himself a little more loose.
Yeah. So the Audrey is activating the Sphere of Freedom, and this is where she explains that the people being abducted into the games are having real experiences that feed back into the games that make them more addictive, which makes more profit to fund her research to stop the Ravagers. That sounds an awful lot like Facebook and Meta, to be honest. I wonder if that was a little bit of commentary on some social media stuff. So what I didn't understand is why they needed to abduct people from throughout time in order to make this work. Why not just people from her time? I mean, it just seems like it's an awful lot of extra work to scoop up people from other parts of time.
Only thing I could think of is just the raw number of people they would need to do it. the amount of fear response they would need,
I
just
guess.
needed so because they're talking billions of people when they described how many people are involved or were being captured. So you try to figure, people would notice billions of people going missing from one time, but if you went through all time over thousands of years, you'd just be the random missing person type.
I took it in terms, and I think that's a good theory. I took it in terms of that they wanted the disorientation that someone experiences if they've been ripped out of one time and dropped in another in an urgent situation.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this goes back to the Gallifreyan control node that she found. It's a piece of time travel technology. It works with time naturally. And so as her plan developed, she incorporated time eddies that were being generated by the Gallifreyan control node into the plan.
Okay. Yeah, both of those make sense. I think
in fact,
maybe a little of both.
That may have been what the Gallifreyan control node was designed to do. Yank people out of time to serve in the Time War.
Interesting. Has there been Big Finish stuff on the Time War?
Oh, yeah. Lots of it.
I would assume. Okay. It might be fun to delve into some of that at some point.
Yeah, they have occasional things where someone else interacts with the Time War. Mostly it's there have been 3 actors who have engaged with it. I mean, there's more than this actually, but the 8th Doctor, who was the Doctor when the Time War began, the War Doctor, played initially by John Hurt, although now that he's passed on, I believe they have a new actor doing the young War Doctor, and the War Master, played by Derek Jacobi. There's a whole War Master series where we get to see Derek Jacobi's evil but nice and sometimes has a conscience master.
Interesting.
Nice. One of my favorite Time War related stories from Big Finish actually focuses on Susan, who is still living in the 22nd century on Earth, and she's grown up and she's had, she has foster children and things like that. And the Doctor, the 8th Doctor, who she has reunited with on occasion, is trying to stop Susan from learning about the Time War. Because what Gallifrey has been doing, you remember those emergency cubes that they used to communicate, like the Second Doctor did in the War Games to contact Gallifrey for the first time. They've been sending out these communication cubes to all Time Lords everywhere in space and time to recall them to service in the Time War. And so one of these cubes is coming for Susan, and the Doctor keeps trying to, from behind the scenes, create situations that will stop Susan from learning about the Time War. And eventually she does learn about the Time War and says, "This is my choice. I'm volunteering." The end. And it's very powerful.
Those are the cubes. Those cubes are in the Doctor's wife as well.
Yes.
I think, the 11th Doctor. Okay. Yeah, I remember those. So back to this story, the Doctor, we have a series of scenes where it was a little confusing because I didn't remember exactly how this went in the other ones. But my understanding is he kept returning to like the drone planet, to the sphere immediately before or immediately after events that we'd already heard. So like he gets to the drone planet immediately after Nova first left with him. For him to grab the prime drone that is going to reprogram the rest, if I understand correctly.
I like how he gives the prime drone a name after he's reprogrammed it. He calls it Cynthia. And they needed to find a way to communicate to the audience that's Cynthia with an S. Cynthia.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, even the TARDIS wiki missed that one. They had it with the C. And then he gets to the Sphere of Freedom immediately after the TARDIS was first captured, because he shows Audrey the drone fleet, but for some reason it's not ready. So she is going to arrest them. Marcus, of course, starts a fight. They get caught. The Doctor, I like this. The Doctor ends up sort of strapped to a table like James Bond in a Bond villain thing, and she's like,
fun.
It was just to keep you from hurting yourself. Let him go.
Yeah. 'Cause he's like, oh, strapped to an interrogation slab. How cliche. It's like, no, he just didn't want you to fall off. It's like, prove it. Okay. And she undoes the straps and he sits up. It's like, oh, okay. I guess that was all they were for.
I did because we've seen like the doctor in that very situation many times. So the doctor then figures out that his future self has been appearing to Audrey in the past, and she hasn't been telling him anything about it so as not to mess up the timeline. And that's what you're talking about before, Jimmy. So the reason I give is she's afraid of giving him too much information, so he won't be coming back the same way, that it will mess up because of causality problem. But that doesn't really track very well, right? I mean, that's sort of okay.
In the moment, so if I put myself in Audrey's shoes, I know a little bit about time travel. I know time can be rewritten. I don't know what will affect what, but I do know this guy does not understand what's going on yet.
Yeah.
I'll be real careful about what I tell him.
Okay.
But one of the problems is they bring that in really late as an explanation. And they've been cagey with each other for like 3 episodes now before we have this explanation. And if they want them to be this cagey, they needed to justify it better.
Right.
They kind of try with the insinuation is, or at least the insinuation that the TARDIS Wikia volunteers picked up, was that the doctor is so disappointed with Audrey morally that he keeps walking away from her. And that explains some of the doctor's lack of wanting to interact with her, as he keeps getting morally disgusted and psychically stalking off. But that's a legitimate reading of what we hear. But I don't find it plausible, because I don't care how morally disgusted you are. Universe-ending dude, interact with the woman involved.
Right. If she's going to be the key to fixing it, you still got to talk to her. There was a nice moment where Nova tells Marcus that the doctor frowns on killing, so if he wants to get a ride home, he's going to need to pull his punches and not kill anyone.
Is punching okay within reason? Yeah,
that was fun. So Nova ends up activating the drone fleet, and she's really pleased, and they start destroying the offending time particles, and she's really pleased because she wasn't sure that the doctor had, whether he'd locked it to just his voice, but the fact that he allowed her to activate it means that he trusted her, and that was a big deal to her. So that was interesting.
Big moment for her, and one of the last things she remembers in the aborted timeline.
Yes, which is, sort of bittersweet, because they've developed a relationship that gets wiped out. So without the time particles, the time eddies get out of control, the central arc breaks down, the Ravagers are escaping. The doctor saves Audrey from getting sucked into a time eddy, but he ends up inside it. And Nova. And he uses the node to do all this communicating with Audrey throughout her life. When its power runs out, he ends up in the neutron star with the Ravagers, which is a neat trick, since you can't really exist in a neutron star, but we'll just...
Yeah, the way I understood it was he's still in the time eddy, but he's able to interact with the outside, which is like how he's interacting with psychically with Audrey during different periods of her life, and then he's also able to interact psychically with one of the Ravagers in their domain, but he's not like fully out of the time eddy and crushed into neutrons yet.
Okay, and that's where he figures out that the fear pheromones are holding back the Ravagers because it's satiating them.
Yeah, they refer to it as the sweetness. And if they don't have the sweetness, then they have to eat everything.
Okay.
But they don't, and this is another writing flaw, they don't, or if they did, it went by so fast I missed it. They don't explain how the doctor knows that it's their own fear pheromones. He just shows up later and announces this.
Yeah.
They should have done something to say, to at least, even if they don't want to tell us that it's their own fear pheromones at this point in the story, they needed to do something where to communicate that the doctor figured out something important about the fear pheromones. It's like, oh, I see what you guys are actually doing. Thank you so much.
Right.
And then later he can announce it's their own pheromones that they're getting off on.
Okay. And it turns out that a combination of the TARDIS key, the TARDIS, and the node, because they're all Gallifreyan tech,
And the Sonic.
Yep. They're all working together to hold back the Ravagers and sustain the Doctor. And this is where we get the line, "The food is fighting back." That's the title, Food Fight.
Yeah.
And
the Doctor being the food.
Yes. So the Doctor ends up going back to the first time he met Nova. And he does ask her here, and he'll figure it out later. He asks her why she knows so much about time travel, and so that's I'll talk about that in a second. But he has to win her over all over again. Like in the first episode, she accused him of stalking her and following her, and she was, and he had to explain, "No, I'm going the same way." Now he says, "Yeah, no, I really am actually following you because I need to talk to you and convince you." Then the Doctor summons Audrey and tells her he's here in the right order this time. And so she's friendlier because of that. And then that's when the Doctor explains how the Ravagers are living off their own fear. And when they play the immersive reality game, they experience a fear reaction when they witness the fear of others. And so that's what they're addicted to. And then he comes up with this idea to modify the game to not need people.
And I like the transition they make at this point. Because, if this were Voyager, we would have to have an ending where they're standing in front of consoles talking dramatically about how they're reprogramming stuff. And instead, the Doctor just lays out, here's what we need to do. Audrey agrees, and we cut to a fireworks celebration. And we learn it's worked, and the sound of the fireworks and the cheering and everything. It's an effectively moving ending.
Right.
And I like that they didn't need to walk us through the execution. Once the audience understands the concept of what we're going to do, we don't need to slog through the individual mechanics of putting that into action. It's okay to just flash forward and yay, it worked. Awesome.
It's done. Yeah, right. And so during that celebration, this is when the Doctor and Nova do talk about, like, how do you know so much? And it's the initial implication is she's more than she seems. Maybe she's a Gallifreyan, one of the surviving Time Lords. But it turns out
so much.
Yeah, she watches science fiction vids with her dad.
She is more than she seems. She's a sci-fi nerd.
Yeah, and there's a special thing at this point. She said the Doctor asks her, "What's your favorite program?" And she says, "Professor X." And this is an in-joke in Doctor Who fandom. Professor X is the equivalent of the program Doctor Who in the Doctor Who universe.
Right.
And so so this is very self-referential. So in the Doctor Who universe, they don't have a TV show called Doctor Who about a space-time traveler with companions. Instead, they have a show called Professor X about a space-time traveler with companions. and Nova says she has seen all 861 episodes of Professor X, which is the exact number of television episodes of Doctor Who that had appeared when this was recorded.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So she's seen the complete run. And this is not Professor X is not the only fandom parody of Doctor Who. If you watch the sitcom Community, which is also very meta, there is within the Community universe, there is another Doctor Who surrogate show called Inspector Spacetime. And there have been like 12 inspectors or so. One of them, very controversially, a woman who was not popular with all of the fans. Even though this was years ago when this was introduced.
That's funny.
Inspector Minerva was the controversial feminist incarnation of the Inspector. The Inspector has constables that travel with him through space-time in a phone booth. One of those red British phone booths.
Yep.
And he fights Blorgons instead of Daleks and all kinds of stuff. But there's a whole in addition to Professor X being a Doctor Who surrogate parody, Inspector Spacetime is also a Doctor Who surrogate parody in fandom.
That's awesome. I suppose some people could deride this whole thing, like the Doctor going gaga over her being a nerd, a sci-fi nerd.
He's more teasing her about it than anything else.
Yeah.
I suppose some people would, it's just fan service, pandering to the fans because everyone listening to this will be a sci-fi nerd. But I don't know. It's like fan service has become a sort of a dirty word, but fans are your bread and butter. Why not give fans what they want and have a fun little thing like this? I don't have a problem with doing that at all.
It's not excessive. It's just a wink to the fans, and winking at the fans occasionally is good.
And maybe a little bit of Christopher Eccleston sort of shows his appreciation for the fans who kind of brought him back to Doctor Who. Frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case a little bit as well.
Well, and she didn't quite understand what the term nerd meant, but she's like, "You're mocking me, aren't you?" Basically.
Yes, yeah, that was good. So, any other notes on this episode? Anything left to say, Father Cory?
Nothing here.
How about you, Jimmy?
One thing that I didn't like, and I liked this overall, it's a good story. I'm enjoyed it. I'm glad Christopher Eccleston is doing this again. One thing I didn't like is some of the sound design of robots and when the Doctor is speaking psychically. I do not know what it is. Maybe people's ears work different in the UK than they do elsewhere in the world. But British sound design is frequently terrible.
Yeah.
It is very hard to understand things at times. I mean, do they have super loud speakers on their TV? I mean, all the way back in the 70s, I noticed this when I was watching British TV on the local PBS station here in America, the Public Broadcasting Service station. The sound was always terrible. You had to crank it up and it was mushy. And I don't know why British sound design is so terrible frequently. But like when the robots are talking, when the drones are talking, it is often very hard to understand them. And if you crank up the volume to understand the drones, everyone else is too loud now. And same thing when the Doctor is psychically talking to Audrey, they're putting this kind of echo sort of effect on his voice that makes him hard to understand too. And it's like, note to all British sound designers, when you're using a special effect to alter a voice, dial it back, like cut it in half.
Yeah.
No, I definitely agree with Jimmy on that. I actually had to use headphones to listen to these 3-parters, headphones off my computer, and that helped a little bit. And I do have a little bit of hearing loss, so I mean that it's needed. But I agree though. There's times where it's just I completely miss a line, and just like, okay, well, I hope it wasn't an important one because I didn't catch that.
Well, this is why so often I have either the Doctor Who transcripts site open when those are available. Not every episode, like the Big Finish ones, aren't available there. But if there's a transcript, I'm reading it along with it. Or if I'm watching the show on TV, I'll often have subtitles on. I gotta, sometimes it's really hard to catch that line. It's not just the accent. It's the sound design, like the any robot voices, and some of these weird, effects that makes it really hard to understand. I'm in agreement with that. Anything else?
But fortunately, they're not the main players in this. So
yes, right.
It's a brief issue and then it's gone.
Yeah. All right. So I think that might do it for us this time. We want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Doctor Who, including Amanda M., Per H., Stephen H., Robert B., and Peter H. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And we'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edits the show for us every week. So that's it from us. We would love to hear what you think of this Big Finish 3-part story, The Ravagers, including this one called Food Fight. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send an email to drwho@sqpn.com. Until next time, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thank you, and the sun has got its hat on, so we better get out of here.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest, and remember, he's a mildly incompetent British officer, but he does his best.